Hi, and welcome to this week's Parenting in the Age of AI. Super excited that you could join us for today's conversation. We're going to begin in just one moment, but if you wouldn't mind, drop in the chat where you're joining us, whether that is live or through one of the recording replays that you'll have a chance to see of today's Parenting in the Age of AI Facebook Live sessions. I'm Amy Love, founder of Discovering AI, and super excited that you're joining us today. So today's topic is so topical. And if you watched the news this weekend, you saw it play out in real time. And that is something really big happened as it related to the US government and two of the largest AI companies in the world, that being Anthropic and OpenAI. So Anthropic is the creator of Claude, and OpenAI is the creator of ChatGPT. So I want to spend about the next 10, 15 minutes talking with you today about the importance of why this matters to our families, why we as parents have to really think about what this means and the implications as we look to raise young people who are ready to lead and grow and thrive, not only in the age of AI, but within our democracy here in the United States. So again, I want to welcome everyone. What we're going to cover is really three things: what actually happened in this brouhaha between the federal government and Anthropic, and then how OpenAI came in. We're also going to talk about why it's such an important civics moment, for why it's worth, as a family, having a conversation about it. And then something we do every single week is we launch a new MindSpark activity, and I'll give you a brief preview of what that activity is so that you're all set to be able to do that this weekend with your family. So here is the news story that happened. Anthropic, the founders of Claude, have been working with the federal government for quite some time, allowing their AI models to be used across the government in all sectors and building out specific use cases and capabilities of how that AI model can help the federal government not only become more efficient, but more effective and have greater insights and just be able to leverage the vast amounts of data that's out there. But in the process of this weekend, it came to a head over two use cases. And the two use cases in concern were around the potential for mass surveillance of domestic citizens, United States citizens, and the use of AI for autonomous weapons without human oversight. So this was a line that Anthropic wanted to draw in the contract that said wide-scale use by the U.S. government except in these two use cases. We hold back the right to say our models cannot be used for mass domestic surveillance and cannot be used in fully autonomous weapons that don't have human oversight. The federal government pushed back and said, as a private company, you don't have a right to tell us what we can and can't use the product for. And this is a true free enterprise decision. And I don't want to minimize the significance of it, because by no means am I, but I just want to say it comes down to Anthropic made the decision that they were not willing to concede those two contractual points. And so the federal government and Anthropic did not agree on that contract. And in the course of that, the federal government also took an aggressive stance by then, in essence, saying that that Anthropic and Claude now represents a national security risk because they wouldn't give the federal government and the Department of War the rights to do these two things. So that's a whole nother topic about, is that response appropriate or not? And that's not what I'm here to cover today. I'm really talking about just the civics issue around making these decisions and what came of it. During the course of that, though, OpenAI, who is the creators of ChatGPT, they came in and said, we will sign a contract with you. We will not draw a line and pull out those two use cases. We will say, as long as you're using AI in accordance with the United States law, then you can use our AI models for that. And so this is where it really comes into the question about civics and how decisions are made. Because for many of us, do you remember if you watched cartoons and on a Saturday morning, you would see the cartoon about Schoolhouse Rock, and Schoolhouse Rocks would talk about how a bill becomes a bill and talks about how it goes through and works its way through Congress, and then ultimately the president either signs it or vetoes it, and what it all means. The challenge with this is much more than just a business headline, because Anthropic's point of view and what they were trying to articulate is they felt that our laws have not caught up with the speed and the rate of technology changes that's happening with artificial intelligence. So their concern was that since the laws aren't caught up, that they felt as a company, they needed to draw a line by specifically pointing out from their point of view that the democratic values associated with freedom of speech and opportunities and our values around not doing domestic mass surveillance was one that they wanted to draw the line on. So these are the exact questions in the future. Your kids will have responsibility for voting on or working inside governments or through processes to figure out what are the laws we as the United States want to have in our society, and recognizing that Congress itself moves very slowly in terms of enacting laws and is very deliberate in their process. Yet the challenges we're facing is this technology is just moving so fast. So this is why the question around civics and this big issue really falls on the families. It falls on each of us to have these sorts of conversations with our kids and make it relevant to them. And so in this course, as I talk about what we do in this conversation around parenting in the age of AI, it's my goal to help us understand how these big topics around AI can be brought down into very actionable, bite-sized pieces that we can use and have conversations with our families about. So just earlier today, I released our latest newsletter, and it was specifically around the issue around civics. And it was around how do we bring these conversations around laws and advancement and AI and technology movement forward and safety features and protocols. How do we have these conversations about what is the role of our government in protecting society, and also putting guardrails around what different branches of the government can or cannot do with these sorts of technologies. So why is it a civics conversation, and why am I raising it? You might remember taking civics when you were in school, but civics as a topic has seen dramatic declines in our education systems. Other classes such as computer science or math or additional language, where we as a country maybe have faltered a bit, have taken over more of the responsibility for civics. In fact, civics is now the least taught class in K through 12 classes. And why does it matter? If you were to ask your kids, let alone your neighbors or your friends, or next time you go to a baseball game, run this little challenge by them. Ask them, say, how many people can name the three branches of government? Can you name the three branches of government? Legislative, executive, and judicial. Guess what? Only about 1 in 4 Americans today can actually name those three branches. And so since this isn't really readily taught in schools, most students spend far less time learning about what are the challenges our government is trying to resolve today, and spends most of their time on a historical perspective learning about the history of the United States and the establishment of our democracy and our nation, our federation. So these decisions about AI right now, around who controls it, what limits exist, who enforces them, these are all civics discussions. And if we have a nation of young people who haven't been trained to understand how our federal and state and local governments work in enacting these, we really leave the power and the control to this to a very few people. So with that in mind, it's why I really want to say when we talk about parenting in the age of AI, even having these conversations are so important that when you turn on the news on a Friday night and this big scuffle around whether or not Anthropic is going to sign this contract or not, and then you have the president and others coming out with threats of statements if they don't allow it, and then a competing company coming in. These are not just business decisions. This is the perfect opportunity for, as a family, for us to step in and say, this isn't about being anti-AI. It's not even being about pro-AI. It's also not about being pro our president or negative our president or pro-democratic or pro-Republican. what we're really talking about is, do our kids understand what they're walking into and the role that they will play as they move forward with soon being voting 18-year-olds and the opportunity to play a role in the determination of our laws and our guidelines. So when we think about that, I really want to underscore for us as parents, you don't have to be an expert on any of this. You don't have to be an expert on tech. You don't have to be an expert on government, but you just need to be curious and asking questions. You might be shocked and surprised even by what your kids' answers are and how they engage in this conversation. And so when we think about it, I want to share that we put out an essay just about 2 weeks ago, and it's already had 500,000+ views. And this essay really is about the fact that something big is happening, and how do we as parents rethink what we're telling our kids? And this is a huge signal when I see 500,000+ people viewing it on X. It's actually now available on all of our platforms. You can gain access to this essay on LinkedIn and on Facebook, as well as on X. But it really connects this story about what are we doing and what are we telling our kids with this week's newsletter article around civics, because it's a news story connected to a bigger frame. And I really want to encourage us to think about how we actually can bring this to life. And a way in which we can bring this to life is to say what we do with our MindSpark activities every Friday. Every Friday we put out a new MindSpark. This is designed to be an activity you can do with your family in 10 to 15 minutes over the weekend. It builds upon the more parent-focused newsletter that I put out every Wednesday. And it's a chance for you to bring these topics to light in a fun, engaging way with your family and have a conversation on it. And so this week's session is really around rules versus roots. And it gives you a chance to talk about as a family, very easy to set up. When you think about a particular situation, right? A situation might be around, if your school doesn't have a policy yet about AI, can you use AI to do your homework and turn it in? For example, that could be a scenario you could do. And so the question is, you put almost, I think, a little bit like Twister, put 4 pieces of paper down, and one is going to say that it is both. One is going to say rules only, one's going to say roots only, and one's going to say neither. And as a family, you can think about going and standing on these pieces of paper for these different scenarios. And then you get to have a conversation about it as a family as to why do you all feel that way? Because this is some of the things that happen in our legislative branches. We debate these ideas and these guardrails and these opportunities. And so when you think about that, your young child might say, you know what? Hey, my school doesn't have a rule about AI, so I think I should be able to use AI. However, in your family, you might have a roots perspective that says, you know what? We don't turn in homework that wasn't of our own work. That would not be our homework. And so you can start to have this conversation. Well, when might it be acceptable and when might it not be acceptable? You can also play it out from the standpoint of saying, let's say you're walking to the park and you find an empty purse, and inside the purse, there's a couple $100. What are the rules about that? What are your roots values about that? It might be interesting to see how your family responds to that. Maybe some people say, you know what? Hey, it's my lucky day. No ID, no information. I'm the lucky recipient of $200 extra. But for the roots in your family, it might be, you know what? That might be ours to keep if we don't find the rightful owner. But in our family values, the first thing we should do is go on to Nextdoor or put up a poster and let people know that we found a purse on the side of the street, and see if anyone comes back and says that it's theirs. So this is how, through this sort of a MindSpark activity, you can start to teach civics. You can also do it from the standpoint of talking about it from the standpoint of what is right or wrong when there are rules and aren't rules. And if I tie it back to the conversation we've had about the AI companies, this is really where it came down, and individual families will make these decisions differently. The Anthropic Claude group felt that their roots said, even absent laws and guide rails that specifically say we will not use AI for fully autonomous weapons or for mass domestic surveillance, even though there are not any laws that make that define that piece, we're going to draw our roots line and say that's a line we're not going to cross. And then another company, OpenAI, came in and said, you know what? We're going to follow the rules perspective and say you can use our AI for any use that is in line with existing US rules and state of law. Again, not here to judge either decision, but it is here for you as a family to have your own conversation about what makes something right or wrong. And with our kids really not learning about civics in school, you have the chance to talk about this and bring it back to life for them. So I want to just wrap up what we're talking about as we think about the issues of civics and the opportunity to use our material with our MindSpark activities every Friday. In the comments, you should see links to our newsletters. You can read this week's newsletter on civics, and then you can also just sign up to have it delivered to your inbox every week. And then on every Friday, you'll also receive the MindSpark activities. So as parents, I just want to underscore, without a doubt, it is very clear that parenting in the age of AI takes a whole new level of engagement and intentionality, because the schools are not in a position to move, just like our government, as fast as the technology and the questions that arise through its use. And so it's why it really comes back to us as parents with parenting in the age of AI to raise these conversations so that we're in fact able to raise kids who can thrive in the age of AI. So thank you again for joining us today on Parenting in the Age of AI. We're here every single Wednesday, 10 to 15 minutes on a topic that we hope that you find interesting and engaging, that you can walk away with at least one nugget that you can open up a conversation and dialogue with your family around AI. And again, hope that you and your family will take the time this weekend to try out the MindSpark activity, Roots versus Rules. All right. Thank you so much, everyone. I wish everyone an absolutely wonderful week, and we'll see you next week. Bye-bye.